The stars outside the window were silent and cold, blinking like distant eyes. Mason sat inside the small control room of the broken-down cargo vessel, pressing buttons that no longer responded. His ship had stopped moving 3 days ago after a sudden power surge knocked out the main systems. The emergency lights still worked, and the oxygen was holding up for now, but communication systems were offline. Mason was stuck. He was a technician, not a pilot, and definitely not a soldier. His job was to check power grids and scan fuel. Cells, now alone on the edge of unfamiliar space, his tools were useless. He had already tried fixing the core twice, but nothing worked. He sighed and leaned back, listening to the soft hum of the backup systems. Then, suddenly, a soft sound echoed outside the hull, a docking click. Mason's eyes widened. He grabbed the emergency scanner and looked out the side panel. A smaller ship, strange and shaped like a smooth wing, had attached to his vessel. Its color was metallic green, glowing slightly under the stars. He stepped back, unsure if he should hide or welcome whoever came aboard. The airlock hissed. Mason stood still as a tall, slim figure stepped into the dim hallway. It was an alien woman, clearly not human, but not threatening either. Her skin was a pale bluish-purple, smooth and soft-looking under the lights. She wore a tight utility suit and carried a tool pack across her chest. Her face showed calmness, not aggression. She looked around once, then spoke in a soft, musical tone. Mason couldn't understand her words. "Wait," he said, raising his hands. "Translator." He quickly turned on his portable translator. The alien woman paused, waited, and then repeated her sentence. "I detected your distress signal," she said. "Are you injured?" Mason blinked. "No, just stuck." She tilted her head. "Your ship is broken?" He nodded. "Yeah, power core's out. I tried fixing it, failed." The woman stepped forward slowly, scanning the wall panels and open wires. "You are human, yes?" "Yes, Mason, technician." She placed a hand on her chest. "Ilari, engineer." Mason felt a bit of relief. An engineer. That was better than nothing. Without waiting for permission, Ilari walked past him and knelt beside the exposed power conduit. She pulled a device from her belt and pressed it against the side. A soft light blinked on her scanner. "You tried to restart the flow directly," she said. "Yeah," Mason replied. "It didn't work." "It wouldn't. This system is older. Human design uses linear compression. You needed a dampener coil." Mason scratched his head. "Makes sense, I guess." Ilari stood up. "I can fix it." Mason blinked again. "You can?" "Yes, but I need 3 things. Heat shielding. Access to your coolant supply. And time?" Mason nodded. "You got it." He showed her to the maintenance room. Ilari walked inside and immediately began preparing her tools. Her calm movements showed experience. As she worked, Mason watched her with curiosity. She didn't act like most aliens he'd met. No pride, no judgment, just quiet focus. After a few minutes, she pulled her gloves off and touched the coolant pipe directly. "You can touch that?" he asked. "My skin adapts quickly. Your tools are slow." "I use my hands." Then something surprising happened. As Ilari leaned closer to the power unit, she began to unzip the upper part of her suit and pulled it halfway down to her waist. Underneath, she wore a thin internal layer, tight to her body, made of strange mesh. Mason froze. "Wait, what are you doing?" he asked, stepping back in shock. She looked up calmly. "This room is hot. Too much heat buildup. My people remove upper protection for thermal work. It is normal." Mason looked away, feeling embarrassed. Yeah, not normal for us." Ilari paused. Human modesty." She zipped her suit halfway back up, tilting her head. "I didn't mean to offend. I just follow my training." No, Mason said quickly. "You didn't do anything wrong. I just didn't expect it." For a moment, they both stood in silence. The hum of the failing ship filled the space between them. "I'll be more careful," she said gently. "Thanks," Mason replied. They worked together for another hour. She explained her method while Mason handed her tools. He had to admit, she was good. Better than him, even. She knew where to look, how to test systems with minimal effort. and how to bypass failed circuits using strange tools made from smooth crystal. By the end of the night, part of the power core lit up with new energy. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Mason leaned against the wall, exhausted. You know, he said, I thought I'd be stuck here forever. Alari looked at him. You still might be, but not alone. Her words made him smile. The ship was quiet except for the low hum of the emergency systems. Mason sat on the floor of the engine room watching Ilari work. She moved with calm hands and sharp focus, her crystal-like tools glowing faintly as they touched the damaged circuits. She had removed her heavy boots and gloves again to move more freely. This time Mason didn't panic. He had learned in the last few hours that her species didn't feel heat the same way humans did, where humans needed thick suits for protection. Ilari used direct touch and flexible inner layers. Still, it was strange for Mason. You sure you're not getting burned? He asked as she leaned closer to the heat vent. My skin adjusts temperature quickly, Ilari replied. If I sense danger, it reacts, Mason nodded slowly. Wish humans could do that. She looked over at him and smiled slightly. You do other things better. That made Mason blink. Like what? You solve problems emotionally. Not always logical, but often effective, Mason grinned. That's a polite way to say we guess a lot. Ilari tilted her head, trying to understand the humor. Maybe, but sometimes guessing helps. She stood up and motioned to a thick metal panel on the wall. We need to move that. It's blocking the energy conductor. Mason stepped forward and grabbed the side of the panel. It was heavier than it looked. He pulled hard, and with a loud creak, the panel shifted and fell to the side. Dust and sparks scattered. You're strong, Ilari said, looking surprised. Not really, Mason said, wiping his hands. Just stubborn. They both shared a brief laugh. As the repair continued, Mason noticed something else about Ilari's tools. They weren't made of metal or plastic like Earth equipment. They seemed to be carved from smooth crystal or living stone, and they responded to her touch. What are these made of? He asked. Harvested silkerite, she answered. It bonds with our energy fields, easier to control. Energy fields? Like mind control? Not mind, she said calmly. More like intention. The tool reacts to my focus. Mason picked one up and tried to use it. It didn't light up. He shook it. Doesn't like me? It is not trained to you, Ilari said gently. It would take time. That's okay, Mason replied. I like my old wrench anyway. She looked at his metal wrench, scratched. Indented. It is simple, but well used. Like me, Mason joked. They kept working for another hour. Ilari rerouted a burned power line through a secondary port, while Mason adjusted the coolant levels. Their teamwork was slow but steady. She knew more, but Mason's hands were stronger, and he could reach places she couldn't. Then, something odd happened. Liam stood with Serenia and the 3 glowing children in the hidden chamber beneath Solara 7. The triplets, each unique, powerful, and full of promise, were no longer just unborn orbs of light. They were alive, breathing, learning. The air felt different now, filled with hope and strength. As days passed, the children grew quickly. Their powers became clearer. The red one showed incredible strength, able to lift heavy stones and move with ease. The blue one moved faster than the eye could follow, running across the chamber walls and disappearing like a flash. The golden one spoke softly, sharing thoughts filled with wisdom beyond years. Liam and Serenia cared for them as best as they could. Together they taught the children about the stars, the galaxy, and the importance of peace. But the galaxy was watching. Word spread about the birth of the starborn triplets. Some species welcomed them with hope, believing this new life could bring balance and change. Others feared their power and planned to stop them before they could grow stronger. The old council sent envoys to watch Liam and his family, but many began to question the old ways. How could they deny the promise of new life? One day an unexpected visitor arrived. A young human woman named Myra, a skilled pilot and explorer, came to Solara 7. She had heard stories about the goddess and the triplets and wanted to help. Liam welcomed her warmly. Myra brought news from Earth and other planets, news of hope and change. She believed humanity had a role to play in the galaxy's future. Together, Liam, Serenia, and Myra began to build a community, a place where different species could live in peace and work together. The triplets grew stronger every day, learning not only to control their powers but to use them for good. One evening, as the twin moons rose, the triplets stood beside Liam on a hill overlooking the valley. The stars shone brightly above, as if blessing their family. Liam looked at them, his heart full. "You are the future," he said softly, "the hope for all of us." Serenia smiled, her eyes shining. "And together we will protect the galaxy." The story of the human and the alien goddess and their starborn children became legend. A tale of courage, love, and the power of unity. In a universe filled with darkness, they were the light. As Ilari leaned into the conduit again, a soft click echoed in the room. A small panel popped loose and fell, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a metal orb pulsing with weak red light. Mason frowned. That wasn't in the blueprints. Ilari moved closer. "It is a secondary core, but this is not human tech." "What do you mean?" She reached inside and pulled the orb out. "This is old, alien, maybe even illegal." Mason stared at it. "What's it doing on my ship?" Ilari turned the orb slowly in her hands. "I do not know. But it was hidden." The situation suddenly felt more serious. Mason realized his ship wasn't just broken, it might have been tampered with. Maybe someone didn't want it to reach its destination. "We need to be careful," Ilari said. "This could be dangerous. Think it's a bomb?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "But it might be a tracker." "Or a jammer." Mason's thoughts raced. If someone planted that on his ship, it meant someone was watching or following. "We should destroy it." He said. "No," Ilari said quickly. "We study first, learn what it is, then decide." He nodded slowly. "Okay." She placed the orb into a sealed container and locked it away. Afterward, they returned to the main panel. The tension had shifted, but they both tried to focus on the repair. Still, the mystery of the orb stayed in their minds. Later that night, they took a break near the food storage. Mason offered her a protein bar, but she politely refused and pulled out a small capsule from her own pack. It expanded into a jelly-like snack. "Different diets," she explained. Mason took a bite of his bar and looked at her. "You've been out here alone long?" "Yes," she said. "I fix systems. Travel between quiet stations." "I do not see many people," he nodded. "Same for me until today." Ilari smiled again. "Then maybe this breakdown was lucky." Mason looked at her and smiled back. The next morning, the ship's faint hum was steady but weak. Mason woke early, rubbing his eyes. He found Ilari already at work, inspecting a panel that controlled the ship's energy flow. "Good morning," Mason said softly. Ilari looked up and smiled. "Morning, human technician." Mason returned the smile, though he still felt awkward around her. Their time together had been strange but good. He admired her skills but was still learning how to understand her ways. As Mason watched, Ilari removed her outer gloves and boots again. This time she explained, "In my culture, removing upper clothing during work is common. It helps with focus and comfort." Mason nodded, trying to hide his surprise. "Yeah, about that, I'm not used to it. In my world, we have rules about modesty." Ilari tilted her head. "Modesty?" "Yes," Mason said. "Like people cover their bodies, especially around others?" Ilari thought for a moment. "Our people see the body differently." "It is natural, not shameful," Mason sighed. "Different cultures." "Exactly," Ilari smiled kindly. "I do not mean to upset you." "No, you didn't. It just surprised me." They both laughed softly. It was a small but important moment. They were learning each other's customs, step by step, later. Mason asked, "How do your people greet each other?" Ilari paused. "We use touch and scent, but not like humans." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Scent?" "Yes, each person has a unique smell. It shows mood and trust." "Wow," Mason said. "That's different." They shared stories about their lives and cultures. Mason talked about Earth cities, music, and sports. Alari told him about her home planet's crystal forests and sky rivers. Each tale brought them closer, breaking walls built by fear and loneliness. But even as they talked, Mason could sense a question in Alari's eyes. "Why did you help me?" Mason asked. She looked down, then back at him. "Because you were alone, and because I believe all life has value," Mason smiled. "That's something humans can learn. Maybe," she said. "Maybe together." Suddenly the ship shuddered. The power flickered. Mason jumped up. "What now?" Alari checked. "The main console. Pressure drop in coolant lines. It might cause overheating." Mason followed her to the engine core. The metal walls were warm to the touch. "We need to fix this fast," Mason said. Alari nodded and moved closer. Her bare arms brushed the metal pipes as she checked valves. Mason watched as she adjusted dials and seals. Her hands worked quickly, but Mason noticed her breathing grew heavy. "You okay?" Mason asked. "I can handle it," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. Mason wanted to help but didn't know how. He reached for a tool to tighten a clamp. Suddenly, a valve hissed and released steam. The heat burned Mason's hand. "Ow," he said, pulling back. Alari quickly covered the leak with her own sleeve. "Be careful," she said kindly. "This area is dangerous," Mason nodded, rubbing his hand. "Thanks." Together they managed to seal the leak. The ship's systems stabilized. After the crisis, they sat side by side on the floor. "Thanks for saving me," Mason said quietly. Alari smiled softly. "We save each other. That is friendship." Mason looked at her. "You're right." In that moment, their differences felt small. Trust was growing. The repaired sections of the ship gave Mason hope, but the engine core was still a problem. The old circuits crackled softly, warning of their fragile state. Mason and Alari knew the real test was yet to come. One afternoon, as they worked together, the ship suddenly trembled. A loud metallic groan echoed through the hull. Pressure spike in the engine core. Alari shouted. Mason grabbed the nearest console and scanned the data. The coolant pressure was dropping fast, and the temperature was rising. "If this keeps up, the core will overheat and cause a meltdown," Mason said, alarmed. Alari didn't hesitate. "We must act quickly. I will access the inner pipes." Mason frowned. "That area is too hot for me." "You sure you can handle it?" Alari nodded. "My body resists heat better. I can go." Without waiting, she unzipped the upper part of her suit again, revealing the tight mesh layer underneath. Mason's eyes widened, but he didn't say anything. He had learned to trust her judgment. She moved toward the engine core entrance. The metal walls glowed faintly red from the heat. Mason watched as she slipped through the narrow hatch. The air seemed to shimmer around her. Inside, the heat was intense. The pipes glowed with a dangerous red color. Alari's skin barely flickered in the glow. She knelt beside a broken coolant valve and began working quickly. Her fingers pressed strange patterns on the valve, sealing cracks with her own technology. Meanwhile, Mason monitored the readings. Outside, the temperature was slowly dropping. Suddenly, an alarm rang. "Core instability rising." Mason yelled. Alari looked up, eyes sharp. "I need more time." She reached into a pouch and pulled out a thin device. It extended and attached to the valve, sending stabilization pulse. She said. The ship trembled again, but the heat began to ease. Mason smiled. "You're amazing." Alari's breath was heavy as she crawled back through the hatch. Her face glistened with sweat. "I'm fine," she said simply. Mason handed her a water container. "Here, you need to rest." She accepted it gratefully. Together, they checked the core once more. The pressure was steady, and the temperature was normal. "That was close," Mason said. "Yes," Alari replied. "But teamwork saved us." Mason nodded. "Couldn't have done it without you." They sat quietly for a moment, catching their breath. Suddenly, Mason's communicator beeped. "It's from Earth Command," he said. Checking the message. The message was short but clear. A rescue shuttle would arrive in 3 days. "We have time?" Mason said, relief washing over him. Alari smiled. "Good, we finished repairs." But Mason felt something more. Their time together had become more than work. It was connection, a link between two worlds. Mason stared at the small screen of his communicator. The message from Earth Command was simple but important. A rescue shuttle was on its way, scheduled to arrive in 3 days. Relief filled his chest, but also a strange feeling. He had spent these days alone on a broken ship, but now with Ilari, it no longer felt so lonely. He looked over at her. Ilari was inspecting a panel on the far side of the room, her fingers moving carefully across unfamiliar controls. The way she worked reminded Mason of a painter, calm, focused, and precise. 3 days, Mason said quietly. We have time now. Ilari nodded without looking up. Yes, time to finish. Mason scratched his head. I was thinking about what you said yesterday about why you helped me. She turned to face him, her eyes calm. Because you were alone, and so was I, he smiled. I like that, it's simple. It is. True, Ilari said. In the vast silence of space, loneliness can be the greatest enemy. Mason thought about that. Earth was crowded, noisy, full of people and cities. Here, far from home, it felt different. I don't usually get help from aliens, Mason said. Most avoid humans or see us as weak. Ilari looked surprised. Why would you be weak? Mason shrugged. Maybe because we don't have the same powers. We make mistakes. We break. But you keep trying, Ilari replied softly. That is strength, Mason blinked. I never thought of it that way. They moved back to the engine room. Ilari pulled out her toolkit, filled with strange devices that shimmered under. The lights. Show me what you need, Mason said. She pointed to a series of wires. These circuits need rewiring. Your ship's systems are old but fixable. Mason grabbed a pair of pliers. All right, let's get to work. As they worked side by side, Mason asked, Do you have family? Ilari's face softened. Yes, I have siblings and parents on my home station. Do you miss them? Yes, but my work takes me far. I repair what others cannot. It is lonely but necessary. Mason nodded slowly. Sounds like my job too. The conversation grew deeper. They shared stories of their lives, of joys, struggles, and hopes. Mason told her about Earth's oceans and mountains. Ilari described the shimmering crystal trees of her planet and the gentle song of her people at night. They laughed over small differences, like Ilari's surprise at human coffee and Mason's shock at her species' ability to see ultraviolet light. Hours passed quickly. Suddenly, Mason stopped and looked at Ilari. Can I ask something personal? Ilari raised an eyebrow. Yes. Why did you remove your clothes during repairs? Back on the ship when it got hot? Ilari smiled faintly. It is normal for my people. Removing layers helps us cool. No shame in it, Mason nodded. In my culture it is different. People feel shy or uncomfortable. I understand, she said. We all have our customs. Mason thought for a moment. Maybe we should teach each other, learn to accept. Ilari's eyes brightened. Yes, that is friendship. The ship's systems hummed steadily now. Repairs were almost done. Suddenly an alert flashed on the screen. Energy fluctuation detected. Mason said, alarmed. Ilari rushed to the console. Something is interfering with the power flow. Mason stared at the screen. Could it be the orb we found earlier? Possibly, she said. We need to investigate. They traced the signal to a small sealed chamber below deck. Inside. The orb pulsed with a soft red glow. Ilari reached out. But the orb suddenly sent a shockwave that threw her back. Mason caught her. Are you all right? She nodded, breathing hard. It defends itself. Mason looked closely. This orb is more dangerous than we thought. Ilari stood up. We must remove it carefully. Together they sealed the orb in a containment unit. Mason looked at her. We have a real problem now, Ilari smiled softly. But we face it together. The ship was quiet now, except for the steady hum of the repaired systems. Mason and Ilari had worked hard to fix every broken part, but one final step remained. The system reboot. It was the most dangerous part of the repair. If done wrong, it could destroy the entire ship. Mason stared at the console. His hands trembled slightly. This is it. One wrong move and... Well, we lose everything. Ilari nodded, calm as always. We must do this carefully and together. Mason swallowed his fear. Okay, I trust you, she smiled softly, and I trust you. They stood side by side at the control panel. The lights on the console blinked in a slow rhythm. Mason could feel his heartbeat matching the pulse. Ready? Alari asked. Ready? Mason replied. Alari began the reboot sequence, entering commands with expert speed. Mason followed. Her lead, pressing buttons and flipping switches as she instructed. The ship's lights flickered. The hum deepened. Suddenly, an error warning flashed on the screen. Mason froze. What's happening? Alari's eyes narrowed. Instability detected. Hold steady. Mason tightened his grip on the console. Keep calm. We must continue, Alari said firmly. They worked in sync, correcting errors, adjusting power flow. The tension grew with every second, then the core gave a soft pulse. The lights stabilized. The ship's hum returned to a steady beat. We did it, Mason whispered, relief flooding him. Alari nodded. The ship is stable. Mason turned to her, eyes wide. I couldn't have done it without you. She smiled. Warmly, neither could I. They sat together, exhausted but proud, for a moment. Silence filled the room. Then Mason asked, If you were human, would this moment feel like this? Alari looked at him, thoughtful. I do not know, but I feel connected. Mason smiled. Me too. Their friendship had grown beyond repairs and survival. It was something deeper, a bond across worlds. The soft hum of the ship was steady, and the lights brightened as the systems fully came back online. Mason stood near the viewport, watching the stars twinkle in the distance. After days of hard work, the ship was finally ready to fly again. Alari entered the room, carrying her tools in a small bag. She smiled softly at Mason. The rescue shuttle will arrive soon, she said. Mason nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. He had looked forward to rescue, but now the thought of leaving Alari made his heart heavy. He walked over and held out a small metal object. It was a wrench, worn and scratched, but carefully polished. For you, Mason said. A reminder of the time we fixed this ship together. Alari took the wrench with surprise. She turned it over in her hands, studying the engraved letters. Mason. And Alari, she read aloud. A symbol of friendship. She looked up at him. Thank you. I will keep it safe. Mason smiled. I'll never forget what we did here. Or you. Alari's eyes softened. Nor I. Outside, the faint glow of the rescue shuttle appeared in the distance, growing brighter as it approached. Mason took a deep breath. I should prepare to leave. Alari nodded, but hesitated. Will you come back? Mason shrugged. I don't know, but maybe someday. She smiled, hope shining in her eyes. Before he left, Mason looked around the ship one last time. It had been broken, but with Alari's help, it was whole again, just like their unlikely friendship. As the shuttle docked, Mason waved goodbye. Alari watched from the viewport, her hand resting gently on the wrench. The doors closed, and Mason stepped inside. But as the shuttle lifted off, he couldn't stop looking back. Somewhere between stars and worlds, a bond had formed. A bond that might bring them together again,